All right, we're rolling. And listen, I am new to the ultra world. Just for perspective, I have done two 50s and one 100. So, in terms of your list of accomplishments, doesn't even touch you. But I am coming from a perspective today where I am a little tapped in with the ultra world. So, I'm not, you don't have to really explain everything to me on how stuff works.
Yeah, I mean, it always amazes me when people say, oh, I'm kind of new at things. I've only run 100 miler and a couple 50 milers. I think our perspective is so warped because, I mean, even this last weekend, I ran just a 50 miler and I'm thinking, oh, it's just 50 miles. And as I'm running along the trails, people that are hiking or, pulling alongside, letting me pass. And they're asking, what's going on here? And I'm like, well, there's a race today. And they're like, well, how far are you guys running? And I said, 50 miles. And they just said, hold it. No.
What?
Yeah. People are running 50 miles today, like in one day. and I'm like, yes. They're like, well, where are the hotels at night? And I'm like, no, we just, the gun went off this morning. We're running 50 miles right now.
That's the most common question I've been getting. Like, when do you sleep, dude?
Yeah, like, what happens when it gets dark? Where do you eat? All those kind of things. So it's fascinating what we do, and I think that you just saying to me, well, I kind of know the ultra running thing. I've done 100 miler and a couple of 50s. That is 99.99% more than anyone on earth will ever do. So congrats.
Thank you, man. Now, is it refreshing for you since when you started seeing the growth of everything?
I love it personally. It's an activity. You can call it a sport. You can call it a lifestyle. You can call it an activity that's brought a lot of joy to my life. And it's when you do something that you once thought, or when you first heard about it, you thought was impossible. It proves to you a lot of things about yourself. So it's been a great internal journey as well as an outward journey. But seeing more people getting into it, I think is a fantastic thing. I mean, it's in so many different ways, it's a fantastic thing.
Yeah, so I had Chris Kosman on the podcast like a couple weeks ago, and I'm sure you guys have a million memories together. But he was saying the coolest thing about the growth of ultra running since he started Badwater was just how international things have gotten in the States. Did you notice that in your race this weekend?
Yeah, I mean, this was a race called the Marin Ultra Challenge, which has become kind of an iconic destination race. So I think there were several countries represented. Certainly, I talked to a lot of folks that had flown in from all over the country to run it. But to Chris's point, Badwater especially, because I've been doing the Badwater, oh boy, before he was even the race director. So which maybe is the first time I did Badwater was 1995, and I was like 23 people at the starting line, all pretty much from the US. And now, there's 100 people. And I think last year there may be 30 or 40 countries represented. So people are coming from all over the world.
Cool. Well, hey, before we move on, can you just give a quick synopsis of who you are and what you do for anybody that's going to be tuning into this?
Hey, I'm Dean Karnazes, and I'm an author and an ultra marathoner. Uh, is that
Now,
enough?
listen, he's a humble guy, but this is, you guys, this is like the Tom Brady of the ultra running world. And truthfully, like I've never been so excited for an episode because your book, and it was so interesting, as I was saying before we recorded, Ultramarathon Man was, I had Mikkel Graglia on the show like 2 years ago. And he was the one who told me about your book. And he was like, the reason I started running in Central Park was because I read Ultramarathon Man. Now, is that the most rewarding part, reflecting on things of your career, that you've been able to document things and share it with people, or is it the race itself?
I think to me, it's sharing it with other people and listening to people saying to me, wow, I read your book and it opened my eyes, and now I'm running ultra marathons. I've got like a lot of messages from people, and to me it's more satisfying, more gratifying than running races. And because if you can inspire someone else, or just enter someone else's life in a positive sort of way, to me that's kind of the highest calling. I can't imagine anything else that's, that is, to me, that is more meaningful than having a positive impact on someone else and hoping that their life can be better.
I'm also at the age, I'm 26. So I'm at the age where you were roughly when you hit that first 30 miler. Like you, just for reference, you were working some job you hated, you were making good money, but you're like, I just have no real like challenge in my life. So one night you just sent it out to the beach from, were you in San Francisco or?
Yeah, it was. But I mean, I was a little bit older than you. I didn't. You look. Your presence is much more mature than 26. But and that is a high compliment.
Thank
But
you.
I was
I wish you told the
my
girls over here that. That'd be nice.
it was my 30th birthday, so I was a little bit older than you. And you're right. I had a great job that I hated, and I was celebrating my 30th birthday in a bar with my bros, having shots of tequila. And at midnight, I told them I was leaving. They're like, "Dude, let's have another round. I mean, it's your 30th birthday." And I said, "No, instead of having another round, I'm going to run 30 miles to celebrate." And they looked at me and they're like, "Wait, you're not even a runner. You're drunk." And I said, "I am, but I'm still going to do it." And I literally walked out of the bar, and I didn't even own running gear, but I had on like these silk underwear, these silk boxer shorts. So I just peeled off my pants and threw them down the alleyway and started stumbling into the night, heading south in my underwear, drunk, and knowing that a town called Half Moon Bay was 30 miles away.
Now, when you reflect on the time before you started running in your 20s, like does it amaze you how sedentary you were given how active you are now?
Yeah, I mean, I was never really a slacker. Like I love surfing, and I was fairly athletic, but I had no cardiovascular health whatsoever. Walking upstairs was strenuous, and I was getting a little punch, and I just looked at myself and said, God, this is not the person I want to be. And you got to change things up. And kind of that drunken night, I think, was the turning point.
Yeah, on the surfing point, that was another one of my favorite parts of the book is when, because I was just thinking, I was who, who would Dean Karnazes' idol be? Like, since you're just such a trailblazer in your industry. And when you said, like, I really looked up to Laird Hamilton and Tony Hawk, I was like, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, well, those guys were trailblazers, not just because they excelled at their sport, but because they kind of created their own thing, right? I mean, Laird Hamilton, he hated surf contests because a lot of times surf contests are very commercial, and you're forced to surf in really horrible conditions, but in major metropolitan areas where there can be a lot of spectators. And he hated it. He's like, I don't like crappy waves and contests and people. I like just charging the biggest, gnarliest waves on earth. And he made a living out of doing it. And same with Tony Hawk. He's like, yeah, it's just skateboarding, but I'm gonna turn it into something. And he did. So those are two guys that really inspire me.
So when you were learning to monetize your career as just a savage runner, like how much trial and error was involved with that for you? Like, did it take you a while to hit your stride, understanding the business side of things, how to keep things going, or?
Yeah, no, I think I just opened my eyes to opportunity. Like I ran this race called the Western States 100-mile endurance run, which you know about. It's kind of like the
Super
original and
Bowl.
most iconic. Yeah, and these two guys came up to me afterward, and they're like, "Hey, we're from the North Face, and we want to start making trail running shoes, like shoes specifically for trail running." Because back then there really weren't specific trail running shoes. I'm like, that sounds like something I'd like to be involved with. So they said, there's not a lot of money in it, but you can help with design and you can wear test the shoes. And so I said yes. And from there, it just kind of other opportunities kind of came my way, and I just kind of seized them. I kind of kept my eyes open to new things coming in, and I always tell people, if you're passionate about something, you can make a go of it, even if it's basket weaving. You just be the best damn basket weaver you can be, and you'll figure out a way to make it into a vocation, into a living. It's scary as hell to step away from like a corporate paycheck and all that kind of thing, but nowadays it's becoming a lot more commonplace, especially with the pandemic. Like when I did it, no one was like an entrepreneur. There's no gig economy, and I just kind of figured it out. But nowadays, there's a lot of opportunity if you want to do what you love.
Yeah, Chris called himself an adventure entrepreneur, and I was like, I guess you probably put Dean in that category too. Two of two, just two of you guys.
Yeah, I mean, well, you can see some of these things behind me. I mean, I've run on all 7 continents twice now. I've been everywhere. I'm heading in a couple weeks to Patagonia to run a 100 miler. After that, I'm going to Greece. So, yeah, I've turned adventure into a lifestyle and into a living.
Well, I just want to talk about the book real quick. So, again, as I was saying, super glad that you told me to read it because it's a way different perspective than the first one. Because it's you almost reflecting on like your last 25 to 30 years in the sport. And so I already had that basis of kind of what your story was from the first one. And it was interesting to see like how you evolved. Like, I don't really remember if you talked too much about your kids in the first one or the first one was when you were, excuse me if I'm wrong, that was when you did like the 190 miles through the night and there was like some charity component to it. And then you like ducked behind the fast food to like get the burritos. Is that right?
Yeah, I ordered I ran a 200-mile relay race.
But you did it on your own.
Yeah, I did. I don't have 11 friends, so I'm like, I'm gonna do it. But I ran out of food in the middle of the night, and I was out on this backcountry road, but I had a cell phone and a credit card, and it was one of those old style like flip phones. But I ordered a pizza and I had it delivered to me as I was running, and that I'll never live that story down. I wrote about that in the book, and that's kind of like I'm known as the guy who ordered a pizza while he was out on a 200-mile run.
I mean, there was an instance, right, where like you tried to go through the fast food window, but she refused to give you the food, right?
Yeah, she said you got to be in a car. I called her she was like the authoritarian taco
The witch.
queen. Yeah, I mean, I pulled up at the drive-through and I'm like, I see my order right there. I got I got $8 right here. Let's just make a quick exchange and I'll be out of here. And it's like, no, you got to be in a car to order from the takeout. And yeah, you're absolutely right.
But you were like 80 miles into a run at that point.
Yes. Well, thankfully, I found a guy that let me hop in the back of his car, and so I ended up getting the order anyway.
Yeah, those are great stories, man. So in this book, just for anyone that's going to be listening in, you kind of describe you like feeling like you might have lost a flame for ultra running a little bit, or like you just didn't feel as passionate about it. And then you said, fuck it. I just got into the Western States. I'm going to sign up for the race and just do it this year on a whim. And you had very little training. You did some sort of 100K near your house. Am I right?
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so then you realize in the 100K, like physically, you were kind of not your tip top shape. And then you end up going and doing Western States, and it was just the hardest ultra experience you had in a really long time. You like fainted, fell in a creek, but you have this like hallucination almost after mile 55. And there's this component of you trying to connect with your son, and you faint, but then you've like envision yourself failing in front of your wife and your kids and your son driving off the mountain drunk. And then you wake up and realize, holy fuck, I got to finish this race. Sorry to give away any spoilers, but that's essentially the meat of the book.
Yeah, and it a lot of people tell me about that plot line because it's not what you expected, right? It's nonfiction, so it's storytelling. All of a sudden, it's kind of a head fake, if you will. So yeah, I thought it was important to talk about being a dad now because you're right. On my first book, Ultramarathon Man, my daughter was just born, so she was 6 months old. I didn't have a son, and now I have both. They're my daughter's your age actually. My son's a little bit younger, and I thought it was important to include them because it's kind of a father-son story as well. I mean, regardless of your age, if you're a father like me, you can relate to it, and if you're a younger man, kind of like you, I don't know what your relationship is like with your father, but
I'm in his home right now.
yeah, yeah. So you got a glimpse into what my relationship is like with my son, and like I wasn't the kind of let's go play catch, son kind of dad. I mean, it was a little bit different. I was traveling the world a lot, and I kind of thought sometimes I'm neglecting, I wasn't there for every soccer game and every basketball game, but when I could be, I was for sure. And I very much kept up with everything my kids were doing. And you kind of saw like the two paths I think my kids could have taken in this most recent book, A Runner's High. And thankfully they took the path that was not quite as dramatic as the one you described, drunk on the mountainside. Yeah.
Well, it seems like their upbringing must have been interesting. It at least seems in the book, it seems like you separated your career from like your home life pretty well. Like, did your kids, what was their upbringing like in school? Like, hey, my dad's this crazy famous runner.
Yeah, I mean, they got to travel. They've been around. I mean, they've been to Australia, they've been to South America, they've been to Europe many times. So they've come along with me. I mean, when I ran 50 marathons in 50 states in 50 days, they were along for the ride. They were on the bus. So, and my daughter was 10 at the time. My son was 8. So, how many kids get to see all 50 states? How many people even? How many Americans get to see all 50 states? So they came along on the adventures, and they always have known me as this ultra marathon guy because I was doing it right when they were born. So I'll never forget one time I was taking my kid Nicholas to school, and I dropped him off, and I kind of had kind of trouble getting up the curb, walking him over to the teacher's assistant who was going to take him into his class. And as they're walking away, I heard the teacher's assistant say, "Is your dad okay?" And I remember Nicholas saying, "Oh yeah, he's fine. He just ran 100 miles yesterday. He's just a little sore." And the
Teachers were
teacher's assistant's like, and he didn't know. He's like, "Oh boy, this little boy's got a vivid imagination." Yeah, his dad ran 100 miles yesterday. But yeah, they just saw me as that guy who runs long distances.
now genetically, you talk about a lot in the book about like, and that's probably one of my favorite things of the ultras is like how primal you feel running out in the woods and like you feel ancestral sometimes. Where do you have any athletic genetics like prior? Or is this random that you're so athletic? Or I mean, your
Well,
dad had run the marathon, right?
yeah, I mean, I'm 100% Greek. So, the marathon originated in Greece, and I'm very proud of my heritage. I mean, the Greeks were athletes foremost. The Olympics started in Greece in 776 BC. So it's athletics is kind of part of my genetic makeup, and there were these athletes in Greece called the Romi, or the Romi, which means day-long runners. And this was basically what they did for their living, is they were foot messengers, and they would run from city states, like from Athens to Sparta, to collect intelligence, to share information. It was kind of like Greece's faster internet was having these runners, because they realized that a trained ultramarathoner could outrun a horse. So it was quicker for them to send runners. Like if they got invaded by the Persians that had a cavalry, they could send a runner that would get to these other city states to warn them before the Persian horses could arrive.
So you think you could be a descendant of the first marathon, the guy who had to run across marathon?
My dad always says we're from the same village as this guy. Phidippides is his name. And I always say, Dad, I was born in Orange County. Like, what village in Greece are you referring to?
Now you've done Athens Marathon, I'm assuming, right?
Yes. Yes.
Now, what was that like for you, like spiritually? Did you have some sort of connection? Did you feel something weird?
It's funny you say that, because the book before my last book, before the one you just read, which is called The Runner's High, the one before that was called The Road to Sparta. So it's all about the origins of the marathon. And it's kind of a fascinating story, because everyone thinks a marathon is 26.2 miles. But the reality is that the foot messenger, before he did the final marathon, had run close to 300 miles. So he had run basically to Sparta and back. And if you've ever been to Greece, you know that it's a really mountainous area to run between Athens and Sparta. But he had run to Sparta and back before he ran the final marathon. And I describe it, I did a lot of research for that last book, The Road to Sparta. And I talk all about the Greek athletes and, the Spartans and Greek history.
Now, this is totally random, but I had this interesting conversation with Mikhail Greglia when he was on too. Have you ever had like a really divine moment in any sort of like really painful situation while you're running where you feel like you're almost talking to God or a God?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you push your body and your mind to that limit, you definitely have, I call them out of body experiences. And, I'm not a traditional religious guy, but I guess, very spiritual. So, one thing I'll never forget is running this 350-mile race, which is crazy, I know. But on the third night of running, I woke up and I'm running in the middle of the road. And I'm like, hold it, why am I running down the middle of the road? So I kind of meandered back over to the shoulder. And then it happened again. I woke up running down the middle of the road and I realized I was sleep running. I was just falling asleep, but I was willing my body to keep going. So that was kind of freaky. And then the morning came around. So this is the third night of running, no sleep in, almost 80 hours. And as I'm running, I look down, and kind of running in between my feet it looked like a praying mantis, like a bug at first. And then it looked like an army man, like a little toy army man running. And I'm looking at this thing between my feet, trying not to step on it. And then it occurred to me that that little thing down there was me. It was though I was in a helicopter or a hot air balloon looking down upon myself, like I'd left my
God.
body. And that was wild. I don't, I mean, how do you describe an experience like that?
So what has that led you to believe about a higher power? I don't mean to get super philosophical. It's just,
Yeah. Uh, I mean, I think that, you know, there's more to us than we will ever understand. We could talk about metaphysics and, what happens after we die and that sort of thing. uh, we'll never really know the answer. I mean, again, the Greeks, the Socrates and Plato. I mean, they thought about these questions deeply, and they have no, we have no more conclusive insight to what happens afterward than they did. But I think that none of us leave this earth. Everything that's here on this earth came from this earth and is going back to this earth, including me, including all of us. So I think when you have an experience like that, I think what you're left with is this feeling that you're part of something grander and you're connected somehow. But it's almost an endearing feeling that you're just part of us.
yeah, there are moments I've had in my life personally where I've done things like, for instance, I just made a movie in Boston, and it was always my goal with our podcast. And I throw a bunch of events here to make a movie in Boston, not go to New York or LA. And then we did it. And like, it was like 5 years of me just trying to fucking grind this out and get this done. And we did it. And when it was done, I reflected on like all the pain it took to get there. And I realized like your pain is super defining of your character. And sometimes I think, sounds nuts, but sometimes I think that you have a certain destiny with the pain you go through to learn more about yourself. Does that make sense? Let me flip it. I'm
No, no,
sorry. Sometimes I get a little lost. When you ran 30 miles from your office, the area where your office was, to the bar, to the beach, when you reflect on that, do you think that was certain destiny?
Oh, absolutely. I think absolutely. Yeah. Now that I've had time to think about it, yes.
Okay. And do you think some of the frustration you felt before that, where you were really unsatisfied, was potentially a higher power saying, dude, you are underperforming because we need you to go down this path?
Yeah, I think, I mean, yes.
Okay. Nice.
But I mean, I think that, the Oracle at Delphi and, said, know thyself, which is kind of what Socrates said, the unexamined life is not worth living. So I think that to understand who you are and to get to that place you just described, you need to push yourself. You can't just sit on the couch and learn about yourself. You've got to do things that really take you out of, I hate using this term, but take you out of your comfort zone. And when I say that, I mean, go run 100 miles. If you want a symbolic way to get out of your comfort zone, go do something like what you did, and you learn a hell of a lot about yourself. And how do you learn? You learn mostly by how you counter pain, right? I mean, to your point, when you struggle, that's when you reveal who you are. And that's how you learn about yourself and you learn how to adapt and improve. And again, yeah, I keep going back to ancient Greece, but I mean, if you've ever read Homer, the Iliad or the Odyssey, the main character, Odysseus, his name translated literally means man of pain. So from the very first writings that we have, the very first storytelling, it's all about a man experiencing pain and how he grows and develops because of this.
Now, given all of your trials now with pain, it must be so hard for you to identify situations where you can test your pain tolerance, given that all you've done. And I'm sure you're searching for it now. Like, what's your take on that? Like, you've eclipsed pain tolerance at this point.
Yeah, I mean, even this couple days ago when I ran this 50-mile race, it was a tough 50-mile race, and I wasn't feeling well at all. I had a horrible race, and I still, I never thought about quitting once. I never thought about anything but continuing, and that's kind of a rigid way to force yourself not to DNF, not to did not finish. I just kind of said, look, you're having a horrible race. What's the worst that could happen? Well, you could pass out and end up in the hospital. You could die, possibly. I mean, if your electrolytes are that far out of balance, you could die. And I was kind of fine with that. Like, if that's the way I'm going to go out, that's the way I'm going to go out. So I'm not quitting. And that was kind of just where my head was at. Like, just keep putting one foot in front of the other. Yeah, it's going to take 11, 12 hours of just suffering and misery, but you're going to keep doing it.
But essentially, that's what you're searching for, right? That's your thing. Like, you want to find that moment where you're incredibly uncomfortable to test yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I think that people are afraid of pain in our society, in our culture. I mean, I don't think that. I know that. I mean, if you watch television, I mean, half the commercials are for, drugs that take away pain. You're in pain, take this. Oh, if you have this pain, take this. And I think that's kind of wrong. I think that pain is an emotion. And I think that if we're going to experience the full range of emotions, we want the highs and we want the lows. We want the pain. So I kind of embrace pain. I say, learn from the pain, learn from the suffering. It's a great emotion and it's a deep emotion and a powerful emotion, engage in it.
So now that you've done that so many times, though, there's no, for you, is there any sort of like, exactly what you're going to feel? So, I mean, that kind of for you must take the edge off the pain you're feeling. I don't know if that makes
Yeah,
sense,
no, I
but
mean, when I used to stand at the starting line of a 50-mile race, I used to think, okay, rip this one up. Let's see if you can do it in sub 8 hours, sub 7 hours. Can you get on the podium? Now, I'm at the starting line going, okay, this is going to really suck. And you're going to work twice as hard as you used to work. And you're going to be slower than that. And so now that's kind of my challenge is like, can you keep showing up? Can you keep making it to the starting line and making it to the finish line year after year? And, that is kind of like my challenge moving forward is how to persevere, right? I've been doing this for 3 decades. Can I do it for 4 decades? Can I do it for 5 decades? And I want to be that guy that's just,
Still doing
wrinkled
it.
and weathered and just, but there he is. There's that Karnazes guy again. My God, the guy is still doing it.
You could try to compete in the Gentleman Olympics at some point. I mean, that's probably 20 years down the line, but
I don't know if I'm ready.
I mean, you'd kill it. So quite kind of reverting back to Laird Hamilton, you would know this better than I would, but what is he has a specific diet. Do you remember what it was?
I think he is kind of like me, and
He's a paleo, right?
he's paleo, and I take it kind of the next level. I'm pretty much raw as well. So I don't cook, like I don't do a lot of cooking or processing of my food. And I think that eating live, kind of what they call live food, is really a good thing.
So what does that mean? Like, what was your lunch today? Or I mean, where you are, it's like 11. So what will it be?
Well, I mean, let's talk about dinner last night, because I do a lot of time restricted fasting.
Me too.
So
Yeah.
so I typically don't eat until a little bit later in the day. But yeah, so I grow a lot of my food here at my house, including a lot of herbs. So I put like oregano and rosemary and almost everything that's grown in my garden. Um, Last night I had a big salad, so organic greens, arugula, um, a bunch of vegetables, none of it cooked, again, just chopped in a salad with I get this really great olive oil from Greece. So I import my olive oil from Greece, and I had sardines with that. So I'm kind of what they call a pescatarian, or a seagan. I eat most of my protein from the sea, and sardines are kind of like my go-to. They're sustainably caught, and they're not super high in the food chain, so they don't have a lot of mercury, and they have a lot of omega-3s, and that's what I ate for dinner. I tell people, if I can't pick it from a tree, dig it from the earth, or catch it with my hands, I don't eat it.
Except for aid station snacks, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I mean, I work with, well, you can probably see my jersey, with Hammer Nutrition. So yeah, during races, I use, gels and energy bars. But I mean, other than that, my normal diet, I usually don't eat anything that's packaged.
So did you run this morning?
No, I didn't. I hobbled last night about 6 miles, and I'm going to run after this interview. Actually, I've got a 2-hour slot. I'm going to run.
So will you approach that run completely fasted?
Yes.
And so I do that too. You're probably the only other person I know that does that. Do you have any sort of intra-run nutrition for your training runs?
As you mean, as I'm doing this run today?
Yeah. Will you do a goo or a packet or anything?
No, just water. Yeah, just water.
So do you bonk ever?
Yeah, I mean, this is going to be a slow tempo run because it's kind of where I just need to get some base miles, and I need to just get out, spin out some of that lactic acid that's still in my legs. So it'll be a slow, like 8 to 10 minute pace with some hills.
So you don't bonk?
No, not really. It just kind of, the whole thing's a bonk.
Yeah.
But I don't come to a point where I can't keep going. I do, sometimes that happens to me, but it won't today, I don't think.
So you like very infrequently will hit a wall.
I think it's hard to say, what one man's wall is like versus another. I have low moments. Uh, are they lower or not as low as the runner next to me? I don't know, because I'm not in their head. And people say you don't experience pain, because I can tell I do experience pain, and I don't know if I'm just immune to it, or if the pain I experience is less than someone else. But I can run with someone for 20, 30 miles, and they're saying, oh, my knees are hurting, my shins are hurting, and I'm like, mine do too. And they'll say, but I got to stop, and I'm like, well, I don't need to stop. And whether that's because my pain is less, or just my tolerance is higher, I don't know the answer.
So, for instance, when you ran the Boston Marathon, you could have done the whole thing fasted, and your times you could have been consistent the whole time with no nutrition.
Pretty much, yeah. I think
Wow.
so. I mean, I like last time I ran New York, it was a cooler day, and all I had for the whole race is a cup of water at an aid station at the halfway point.
Wow. So, let's say you go hit that 10-mile run today. What would your caloric budget be for the whole day?
Probably, my metabolism's still kind of revved up from this race over the weekend, so probably 35 to 3,700 calories, maybe 4,000 calories.
And so, mostly plant based with sardines.
Yeah, and healthy fats. I think that fat is a more concentrated source of calories. So the olive oil, avocado, these healthy fats, I think are how you get your calories. Because let's face it, you can't eat 4,000 calories worth of roughage. You'd bloat a rhinoceros. Yeah, I mean, I could fill this room with 4,000 calories of lettuce.
Yeah, you could. Now, you're also time restricted. So that's been a problem for me too, is because, so mind you, I'm a bigger guy. I'm like 6'3", 205 to 220 pounds. So I have found it incredibly hard to get clean calories within a 6-hour window, but that's something you're doing.
Well, have you ever tried nut butters?
I have
Hazelnut butter or cashew nut butter. I mean, those are good
almond
sources
butter.
of calories. Yeah, almond butter. Those are good sources of concentrated calories. So I didn't realize you're such a big guy. You have a tougher go of it than I do.
I know, I'm not like you speedsters.
Well, I have a newfound respect for you running 100 miles because let's face it. I mean, it's harder when you're bigger.
I was the biggest guy out there by 3 inches, 4
yeah.
inches.
Yeah, and I mean, your body is working as hard. Your heart, just to get blood to all your muscles, is huge, and it's working really hard.
No, you're like a border collie. You'll live till you're 20. I'm kind of like a Great Dane. You know what I'm saying? I have like a strong 8-year period.
Yeah,
Now,
well, I think you're a young guy, and you're doing a lot of things right, like your time restricted fasting. You're paying attention to your diet. Knowing these things and knowing that you're bigger is going to bode well for you in the future. I think you've got more than 8 years.
thank you, man. I appreciate that. Now, is the aim with your diet to get as close to what the medieval Mediterranean diet was? But they were doing meats though.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of emulating the ancient diet, and they were eating more. I mean, it was wild game, so they were doing more wild game. But the Greeks were also, they were harvesting from the sea for years. So a lot of protein came from the sea. I'm also eating this. There's a sea vegetable they harvest in Greece. It's seaweed, but it's not like traditional seaweed. And I eat a lot of that, and it's amazing. So it's a source of plant from the ocean. It grows like in the tidal pools.
Do you ever have a time in your day where you feel lethargic?
I used to. And that's kind of why I started experimenting with the time restricted fasting. But now I don't. I pretty much have very consistent energy throughout the course of the day.
What about your mental acuity when you're fasting, though? I've noticed when I'm fasting, I feel much more focused, much more clear. I can connect thoughts better. Do you feel the same way?
That's one of the reasons I do it. Yeah. And do you drink coffee? Let me ask, do you drink coffee in the morning?
Morning, all day,
Are you a
brother.
coffee drinker?
Come on. I'm assuming you are.
Yeah, I love my coffee, and you know what else I do is I put fresh rosemary in my coffee grinds. So rosemary has one of the highest antioxidant values of any food, and it takes your coffee to the next level. It mellows out the flavor as well. It makes it less harsh.
Now, I know you got tests done. Like, I remember seeing a video of you running on a treadmill with you all wired up. What were the findings of that in terms of how your body processes lactic acid?
Yeah, they found that I have a unique ability not to accumulate lactic acid. And lactic acid is like a byproduct of cellular metabolism, and it can be like a limiting factor and cause cramps and muscle fatigue and that sort of thing. So they found that I could just keep running, and my lactic acid just did not build up. And they're not sure why. They're like, we've tested a lot of Olympic athletes. We've never seen anything like this.
Was that genetic or did you develop it?
They think, I mean, every endurance athlete has a higher threshold for lactic acid, so it's an adaptation that you get when you develop aerobic capacity. But they said with me there was something else beyond that, and they said your genetic sequencing is different. My mother comes from an island called Ikaria in Greece. It's where Icarus, the guy with the wax wings, crashed, and it's one of the blue zones. And I don't know, have you ever heard of the blue zones?
I have not.
The blue zones are these 7 areas across the globe where the indigenous peoples live to be the longest. So
Okay.
this Greek island, they have the highest concentration of what are called centenarians, and these are people that live beyond 100. And so part of my genetic makeup comes from that island.
Imagine if you had never done that run and you never knew this about yourself. How crazy is that?
Yeah, I mean, you were talking about destiny. All of this I might not ever have known. Yeah, you're right.
Wild, man. Now, when you reflect on your 50-50-50, I don't know if you've seen The Iron Cowboy.
James, sure.
Yeah. Is that fun for you now? I'm sure you're probably one of the first when you had done it, but a lot of people are doing challenges like that now.
Yeah, it's really great for me to watch this. There are all kinds of challenges, and to kind of have kind of been a pioneer in that field, if you will, if you call it a field, is really great. Part of the beauty of running a marathon in every state is that there are marathons in every state. So I ran like on sanctioned certified marathon courses, but people are doing other things, like like James is like, I'm gonna do an Ironman in every state, no matter how I do it. If that's going to be on a treadmill or a stationary bike or in a pool. So he's kind of like, there's all these permutations on the theme.
What have you seen the Infinitus in Vermont? Have you heard of that?
Yeah, I've heard of it. Yes.
Does that interest you at all? It's 550 miles.
Yeah, I mean, I've done things like that. I ran one time down the backbone of California. We have these things out here called missions. So I ran 700 miles from basically Sonoma in Northern California to San Diego. So I've done a lot of things kind of similar to those races. I did a race at the end of last year in Australia, 1,000-mile race called 1,000 Miles to Light.
What?
Yeah, I did.
Last year?
Yeah, it was in when was it? In September.
1,000 miles? That's crazy, man. You are who you are for a reason, man. Wow. What was that like?
Australia is very unique. So, it was unexpected. I'll put it that way, because originally it was supposed to be longer than that, and it was supposed to be all the way across Australia, from a city called Perth to Byron Bay. From the west coast to the east coast. Essentially, it'd be the equivalent of running from California to New York, only in Australia. But then the Delta, remember the Delta variant?
Mhm.
That hit, and we could no longer run all the way across Australia. So now it's just running across like one of the biggest states in Australia, which is called New South Wales. And I'm like, that's cool. It's still 1,000 miles. And then when we got to Australia, Delta got really bad. So they said, well, now you got to run 1,000 miles within this military base.
Oh my God.
And I said, I hope it's a big military base. And thankfully it was a big military base, but we were like in an isolation bubble when we did this. We weren't able to run all the way across Australia.
How many days did that take you?
10.
So you're doing 100 a day.
Yes.
Now, I mean, I'm sure over the years of you doing interviews, you've gotten asked this, but just you never had any major injury.
Knock on wood.
That's amazing.
I
You
mean,
stretch?
I've lost toenails as you know. I mean, that's not really a major injury, but
You stretch?
no.
That's awesome, man. Oh my God. So you just did 1,000 in Australia. What in your mind right now are you like, that would be a really big challenge that I would like to knock off my list?
Yeah, well, it's funny you ask. I'm actually working on something, a project with another ultra marathoner. His name is Charlie Engel, and I think you got to look up Charlie Engel and have him as a guest. He's fascinating. He'd be a great guest for you. But we're going to run from the lowest point on Earth to the highest point on Earth.
Dead Sea to Mount Everest?
How'd you know?
Because that's my physical goal that I'd like to get done is climb Everest.
Yeah, I mean, when I tell people that, a lot of them say, "Well, I know Mount Everest is the highest point, but they don't know the lowest point." So, good for you for knowing that. And you know how far it is between the two?
I'm gonna guess. I mean, I know Everest is around 28,000 feet high, but you're asking for the distance between the Dead Sea and Everest, right?
Yeah, I mean, you just take a stab at it because if the Dead Sea is a long way from Mount Everest, so to run from the lowest to the highest, you got to cross a couple continents.
Uh, 2,000 miles.
It's a little bit further, and I guess the answer depends on the route you take. So, the most direct route is about 3,000 miles, but that routes you through Iraq and Iran, and also some of Afghanistan. So, whether we can get permits to do that is up in the air. And the least direct route, which is running up north above the Caspian Sea, is about 5,000 miles.
So you're planning on doing the 5,000?
I hope not, but we'll see. I mean, things are looking pretty good. And then I don't know if you've been following. There's a lot of conflicts going on in the world right now, but another one is beyond what's happening with Russia. Is Iraq and Iran are back lobbing bombs at each other.
I did not know that. So how would you do Everest? Because most people have to get adjusted to the altitude for like 2 months before they climb it in that safe zone. So how are you planning on executing on that?
Well, I mean, we'd still acclimatize, but because a lot of people just their cardiovascular system is not as developed, so it takes a little bit longer for them to acclimatize. We'd be on the kind of the fast track program, but we'd still, have to go and spend some time at base camp. And
Oh,
obviously, I say run from the lowest point to the highest point. We're not going to be running up Mount Everest. At a point, the running shoes are coming off, and the hiking boots are coming on.
how long will you have to climatize for?
Not long. I mean, probably we'll use oxygen. I mean, that's the prudent thing to do is use oxygen. We'll most likely use oxygen. And if that's the case, it probably a 2-week trip.
Okay, cool. And so when are you planning on getting this thing done?
Well, if you know about climbing Mount Everest, they're kind of there's a window when you can arrive, and it's usually kind of in May 1st to June timeline. But because of the way, I guess you could say, climate change is impacting the globe, there's like a secondary window now in October. So we're either going to leave, depending on the route we take, in January of 2023 and try to hit the May window for climbing Everest, or we're going to leave in June of 2023 and try to hit the October window.
That is going to be awesome.
Yeah.
Dude.
We're gonna stand up paddleboard across the Dead Sea, and then run.
What a journey that will be! Wow, you're gonna see some crazy stuff out there.
That's what I love. Yeah.
Well, hey man, that wraps it up for my questions. I had a really good time. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thanks for having me on. Yeah, you're a great host, and I hope we can run together one day. Yeah.
What is your favorite movie?
Oh, I'm trying to think of ones. This might sound funny to you, but I was like a huge Woody Allen fan. So like he did a parody on Tolstoy. It was called War and Peace. He did Love and Death.
Okay.
That was a movie that, I mean, it's super quirky. It's kind of intellectual, but that was a good one.
If you like Woody Allen, do you like Wes Anderson?
Not really. No, I don't
Really?
like that kind of. I like it a little more. I mean, Woody Allen is like he's kind of eclectic. I like Zorba the Greek was a great movie to me. I mean, that's an old movie. Newer movies, Whiplash. Have you seen Whiplash?
Of course.
Yeah, I mean, that's to me that was really powerful. I mean, Gladiator. Of course, everyone loves Gladiator. That was a
Best.
good
Did you like 300?
Yeah, I mean, it was a bit comical to me. I wish it was a little bit more real.
It was entertaining though.
It was entertaining. Yeah, well, I mean, we can watch it today and it's still entertaining. I mean, how old is that movie? That movie's got to be almost 20 years old. So
Yeah, it's probably close.
he's like you. I mean, so ahead of his time. It is in all the animation they were doing.
How about Troy?
Troy was okay. I mean,
You didn't like Troy? Oh
yeah,
man.
it's okay. I mean, I don't know. I know the story so well. Like I've read so many. I just think it was a little bit over the top. Actually, Troy was pretty good. I don't know. Brad Pitt, that wasn't his best role. Like I think he was better like in Fight Club.
I am on the other end of the spectrum with you on this one, man.
So you like Troy? I'm glad to hear it because you're 26, and if you like Troy, I mean, have you ever read the Iliad?
I Spark Notes it in college, truthfully.
Okay.
Do you know what Spark Notes is?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like the cheating way to read.
Yeah, well, you didn't have a good professor because, like, a good professor, you would want to like delve into it. If it's told well, the Iliad is so powerful.
You like it more than the Odyssey?
They're both really good.
What is the third book? What's the third book called? The third big epic
of Homer?
Of that time. There's the Odyssey, the Iliad. There's one more.
There's Aeschylus. There's Epicurus.
I'll have to tell you on the email.
Yeah, let's be in touch. I actually I'm late for a meeting. You're a fascinating guy, but I'm late for another call, so I gotta bug out.
No sweat, man. Hey, yeah, I'm glad we met. I'll get your address, and hopefully, if I'm in San Francisco, we can meet up sometime.
That'd be great.
All right, brother. Great to meet you. Thank you so much.
Good move to LA. Okay. Cheers.